Hello and welcome to Cooking with Colin. Today, per request from my soon-to-be sister-in-law Lelia, we are going to do my mom's lasagna recipe. Although since we use egg noodles instead of lasagna noodles, it might be more accurate to call it a lasagna casserole. So first thing you're going to want to do is get super comfy, because cooking, it involves hard work and sweat, and a lot of the time I end up bleeding into the food. My mom always said that was our secret family ingredient. A little bit of blood showed that you cared. The second thing to do is gather your ingredients. This is super important because it really sucks when you're halfway through cooking something and you realize you're missing one of the key ingredients. It's just like, fuck, I gotta go to the store, I gotta turn everything off, I gotta make sure the dog can't. Anyway, you get the idea. So make sure you have all your ingredients. First off, we're gonna make sure you have all your cheeses. Your lovely, lovely cheeses. Now, you're going to want ricotta cheese, mozzarella, Parmesan, and then for the top of your lasagna, you're going to want some sort of Italian cheese blend. This happened to be on sale. I shopped the sales. But we're going to put this aside for the moment because we're going to, and you want egg noodles. This is very important to remember. We don't want lasagna noodles because the problem with lasagna noodles is that you need a knife and it all slides apart. The beauty of these noodles is that they cook pretty flat, so you get a nice noodle layer, but you just need a fork or heck even a spoon to eat your lasagna. It's great. But those two things we're going to put aside for the second video because now we're going to make the sauce. Now, I frequent soup kitchens and EBT, so most of my tomato sauce comes from whatever they had at the soup kitchen. It's this lovely collection of jars and miscellaneousness over here, and I'm just going to throw it all into a crock pot. So yeah, step one, throw my random jars of miscellaneousness into a crock pot. Now, in addition to these random jars of miscellaneousness, I like to make my seasoning a little bit more personalized. And I have found that Guinness, right here, makes one hell of a base for pretty much anything with meat. I discovered it making Guinness stew, but it's also dead good for pasta sauces, any sort of stew you want to make at all. If you don't want that sort of sweet taste that you get with red wine, then Guinness is the way to go. As you can see, I put a little bit of Guinness into the jar, and it's better than water. And if you swirl it around a little bit, you get all of that tomatoey sauce goodness out of the jar, and you don't thin your sauce down with unnecessary water. I also like to use tomato paste. Because I'm using a bottle of Guinness, I want something a wee bit thicker to go in there with everything. So, tomato paste, again, really good. Of course, you do need the tools of the trade to get to it. Now, while I'm doing all of this preppy goodness, I will mention that a simple jar of Classico tomato sauce, you want good tomato sauce, don't get cheap tomato sauce, but a simple jar of Classico, yeah, you can use that instead. You really don't have to go all in the way I'm doing. But like I said, I get all these cans of tomato sauce from my local soup kitchen, and, I don't want any of it to go to waste. I'm poor. The other thing about this recipe that I'll mention is basically all of the ingredients, with the exception of the Guinness, you can get using food stamps. So there's very little outlay of capital. And the other thing I'll mention is that lasagna noodles, egg noodles, these things don't usually come, you can't usually get these things in a soup kitchen, but most forms of pasta you can pretty cheap. And really, you can use any sort of pasta for this recipe. It honestly doesn't matter. Okay. Jars, jars, and more jars. Oh, the joys of jars. Oh, right. So, we're throwing all of this into a crock pot because it's going to simmer for about 3 hours, I'd say. I'm sure my sponsor would tell me that I'm not supposed to cook with Guinness at all, but I figure between simmering it in the crock pot for a good 30 minutes or 3 hours and then baking it for at least 90 minutes, there can't be any alcohol left in that sucker. There just can't, you know? And like I said, because this is a marinara sauce, you're really not going to taste the Guinness at all. It just adds a really nice hearty flavor to it. So, Guinness, Guinness, Guinness. I personally also like to use diced tomatoes. That's going to be next. So that was 2 cans of tomato sauce, 2 cans of tomato paste. Oh, doesn't that look lovely? And then some diced tomatoes. And then I'm actually going to use some regular tomatoes, but what I did is I froze those. So once they defrost, it's super easy to peel, and once they're frozen, they turn into mush pretty quickly, so you don't have to worry about dicing them or anything like that. So, tomatoey goodness. Okay. Oh, all right, last jar. If you want a more detailed recipe, there are all sorts of recipes online. Like I said, I basically just run with what I can get at my local soup kitchen. There are lots of other options out there. Okay. I'm going to do the tomatoes last because I've never done them before. So that'll be a bit of an experiment for the two of us. I'm also going to add these thick, zesty spaghetti sauce mixes. Again, got them at my local soup kitchen. So, you know. And then I like to add my own interesting seasonings as well. Now, it's important when you use stuff like bay leaves or whole cinnamon sticks or anything like that, that you're going to have to strain these out first, because you don't want to eat a bay leaf. You don't want to eat a cinnamon stick. So, if you don't want to deal with that, you can always just stick with the dried and crushed stuff that you don't have to strain out. So, bay leaves, oregano, and the reason I'm doing this in video form is because I don't really use measuring cups. I just use what looks good. So basically, just cover the sauce in oregano. Cover the sauce in basil. It's roughly equal parts oregano to basil. Most people use more basil than oregano, but I prefer oregano. Basil's a bit sweeter. The 2 bay leaves. And then, because I'm me, I like to make it a little bit interesting. And this is not standard recipe for a marinara sauce, but, you know, I get bored. So, 2 cinnamon sticks in a pot. Ooh. Black pepper, this is actually pretty standard. Not too much though, you don't want it too spicy. Same with your red peppers. Just a little dash of those. I mean, I usually add more, but if I want other people to be able to eat it. And then again, this is unique to me. I throw in a few cardamom pods. You can also use ground cardamom if you don't want to have to deal with getting the cardamom pods out at the end of this. And ginger, which is always good. Ooh, and I like a goodly bit of ginger up in there. And then, again, I like my stuff a little bit spicy. I'm going to use some cloves. Just a wee dash, whole cloves, about 5 or 10. All right. Let's add in the rest of the Guinness. Now, like I said, I don't use any set recipe, so feel free to play with this however you feel like. But I do recommend using a crock pot instead of a pot, just because you get a more even cook throughout, and it doesn't have to simmer for as long. And since I'm freaking lazy, the less cooking I actually have to do, the better. So this, you don't really have to stir, you just turn it on and leave it be. Okay, so while that's going, I'm going to put some of my seasonings away, or at least off my counter space. And there we go. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, because I need more vegetables in my diet, is I'm going to add a thing of frozen kale and a thing of frozen spinach. This really doesn't affect the flavor much at all. It might make it ever so slightly more bitter, but nothing that you would ever notice. However, if you don't need the roughage or the vitamins or what have you, feel free to skip this step. So that's my kale, and then my spinach. Like I said, you can do it fresh. I prefer to do it frozen just because it generally, I don't know when I'm going to be cooking, so I can sort of buy this stuff in bulk when it's on sale, and then keep it around for my next cooking excursion. But if you know exactly when you're going to cook, or you have the funds for fresh produce, either works just fine. Okay, that's lovely. All right, now I'm going to grab my stirring spoon, at least pretend to mush it all in there. Yes, very important to plug in your crock pot and to turn it on. Okay. Next up, we're going to make the meat. So, I like to use lean Italian turkey sausage, preferably the hot Italian turkey sausage. Although, like I said, if you're not, it's a bit more expensive than standard sausage, the turkey sausage. But if you're worried about your weight, like I am, it's, I think, worth the investment. However, if you're not worried about your weight and you're more concerned about your budget, then by all means go with beef. But again, I recommend the spicy option. Much better, the spicy option. Okay, so get yourself a pot. Pan. I like to use a wok, but you know, I'm a bit pretentious sometimes. Get it nice and oiled up. Now, what you want to do with the sausage, this is a trick my mom taught me, is you slice the wrap. So you just slice it down the middle, and then here you go. You pop it out, you plop it in the pan, wrap goes back in the container. Did I mention you should probably wash your hands before cooking the way I cook? Because, as you may or may not be able to tell by now, I'm a very hands-on type chef. Hence the apron, the clothes I don't care about, the whole shebang. Alright. Woo-hey! Turkey sausage. Yummy, yummy. I tend to cook in bulk, but like I said, I also shop for what's on sale. So it's super easy to have this recipe. But I tend to throw in 2 things of sausage. And the great thing about this recipe, and I'll mention it again down the line when we get to the actual making of the lasagna, this is the making of the stuff that goes into the lasagna, is it freezes up real good. So all of this, chances are, I'm going to have a lot of extra lasagna fixings. But I just make another lasagna, throw it in the freezer, and the next time I feel like lasagna, I've got one ready cooked. So, okay. Let's fry up some sausages. Yummy, yummy. Like I said, aprons are my friend. Okay. Yay for aprons. So, you're going to want this to cook at a rather low, medium to low temperature. And you're going to get your wooden mallet here, or whatever you prefer for cooking stuff in. And you're just going to sort of hack at your sausage, because you want it to end up with basically the texture of ground beef. You don't want it to be full-on sausage links. So you just mush it down, hack it up. At this point, I like to add a little bit more seasoning, but you totally don't have to. Again, you really don't have to go through the whole crock pot type of cooking. All you really have to do is cook your sausage any way you like your sausage, and add a jar of Classico, or, you know, Safeway Select makes a pretty decent pasta sauce, but that's more expensive than free from the soup kitchen. So, okay. So, well, that's going to simmer, and I'm going to go back to this one from time to time, making sure it gets all brown all around it. I'm going to dice an onion and dice some garlic. So, here's a trick I learned from Veronica Mars. I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually work, but if you hold a spoon, you don't cry when you cut onions. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's bullshit, but hey, makes for a more amusing video, right? Oh, totally not working. I'm tearing up already. So everybody's got their own tricks for cutting up an onion. Okay, so at this point, I've got about a quarter of the onion cut. What I'm going to do is just take a handful of that and throw it into the meat that I've got cooking. And then I'm going to cut up the rest of the onion and throw it into my crock pot over here. And for the stuff, I mean, it's all going to go in the crock pot eventually anyway, but so it doesn't really matter, but I sort of prefer to do it this way. Don't know why, couldn't really tell you. Actually, that sauce is looking a little bit thicker than I like, so I think I'm going to add another bottle of Guinness. Righty-roo. Guinness. Now, a lot of people like to take a little sip from the bottle to make sure it tastes good. Like I said, my sponsor would kick my ass if I did that. Well, he'd just be very disappointed in me. All right. In the meantime, once you hear your meat starting to sizzle, you're going to want to go at it again and flip it round. I think it's a little low. Okay. Where'd my lid go? There's my lid. Okay. So, all right. Leave that to stocking. Come back to my onion. Spoon trick. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting it into really thin pieces this way, or at least as thin as I can. Ooh. And then I turn it on its side, get all the pieces lined up so it still looks like half an onion, and then I just cut it the other way. Okay, if you like it more oniony, add more onion. If you like it less oniony, well then don't add an onion. That's smelling good already. Okay, like I said, don't forget your meat. So basically what you're going to want to do is the bottom part's going to be browned by now. So you just sort of flip it over and then hack at it some more. And flip and hack and flip and hack. And if it's not browning quite as fast as you would like, turn the heat up a little bit. If it's sizzling too fast and you can't get through an entire onion before you have to go check on it, your heat is probably too high. Trash, trash. Okay. Now the garlic. I like a lot of garlic, so basically I'm going to use this whole clove right here. Now, fortunately, because of the crock pot style cooking, and actually I suppose this is true even if you don't use a crock pot because you're going to bake it, you don't need to cut it up all fine or anything. So, lob off the bottom, gonna squish it with your knife. This makes for easier peeling, and also, similar to the idea behind a garlic press, by smushing it with your knife, you're actually releasing more garlic. So I'm going to press it again. Then I'm just going to cut it into manageable sizes and throw it in my pot. Now, I've been told that crock pots generally come with some sort of a crock pot in this lovely metal heating container. Mine was free, and it didn't, but I haven't set the house on fire yet, so I'm running with it. But it does make the lid balancing a trifle bit precarious. Like a smoosh. That was a good smoosh. Peel, cut it up a little bit. And I'd usually go one for the pot, one for the wok. One for the pot, one for the wok. Smoosh. It's actually really fun smushing garlic down. It's very satisfying, and it smells really good. I know you can't smell through a video, but trust me, mate, it smells amazing. Cut off the bottom, smoosh it down, remove your peel, cut it into reasonable slices, and away we go. Whoa-hey. All right. Yeah, that's browning up nicely. So once this is completely browned, you can either just add your basic jar of Classico and mush it up a bit, and then you're good to go. Or what I'm going to do, which is once this is completely browned, I'm going to throw it into my crock pot. Whoosha, whoosha, whoosha. Alright. The other thing, if you would particularly like the Guinness, but you don't want to go through this entire crock pot craziness, is once this is all brown, you can add a small jar of tomato paste, a bottle of Guinness, and then your basic jar of Classico. And I did that once. It turned out pretty dang good. Not as good as this whole process, but still pretty good. Also, if you want the extra vegetables of kale and spinach, again, you don't have to use the crock pot. You just, after you've let your meat simmer in the tomato sauce for about 5 minutes, you just add in your spinach, and once it's all good and defrosted, you've got yourself a pretty dead good tomato sauce. All right, ooh, that didn't mush very well. That's better. Hacka, hacka. Hacka, hacka, hacka. Now, if your meat starts sticking to your pan, all you gotta do is add a little bit more olive oil. Oh, sorry. Did I mention that's what I used? It's in this lovely bottle. Is our olive oil, and actually, there's a piece or two of crushed garlic in there as well. So it's garlic infused olive oil. Because if you couldn't gather, I like garlic. Okay. Next, I think I'm going to try my hand at peeling these tomatoes. Like I said, this was an idea I found online. So I've never actually tried this before, but it's frozen. Oh, look. That actually peels pretty easy. Ah, it's a little bit drippy, but easy. So basically, I just cut the bottom off of it, and then I started peeling it, and now it's dripping all over the place. So I think the next ones I'm going to do will actually be over the crock pot. So we'll just plop that in there. All right, look at that. All right, so like I said, I just cut this part off. Bye-bye you. And then just started peeling. Wow, that's really easy. How exciting. And like I said, once it's frozen, it's going to mush up real fine, so you don't have to worry about dicing it or slicing it or anything like that. Once it starts to cook in the crock pot, it's just going to mush its own self up. A lot of times I like to listen to music while I cook. And I cook and I sing along and I listen to music and it's super fun. But I'm not sure about copyright stuff and I don't want this video to get taken down or silenced just because I couldn't figure out what I could play on YouTube that wouldn't get me in trouble with copyright police. So you get no background music today. And now what I'm doing is I realized I had a little bit of garlic that I hadn't mushed up yet. So I'm just sort of alternating garlic and tomatoes because you got to keep it entertaining. If you're not having fun while you're cooking, you're not going to like cooking and you're not going to want to cook. So like I said, the music really helps with that. Experimenting a bit, try different seasonings, see what you like. A lot of people, would think cardamon's a crazy thing to do. But not me. I love it. Cardamom is actually one of my favorite seasonings. A pinch of it goes into pretty much everything I make. So, experiment around, find what seasonings you particularly like, just what works for you generally. Ooh, that meat's coming along nicely. Anyway, I've never done a video like this, so I hope you can hear me. We'll see how it goes. Come on, let go. There we go. Alright. So it's basically a whole clove of garlic, because that's how I roll. Again, I prefer a wok over your standard issue frying pan because you get more even, it cooks more evenly. But if you don't have a wok, don't worry about it. Plus, they're a bitch to season. The other reason I like a wok is because I, went to all the trouble to season this. So most of my meat stuff doesn't stick to it, but it was a bother. So if you can't be bothered, don't worry about it. Tomatoey goodness. Another thing I've heard, and I haven't tried it myself, is actually once you've peeled your tomato, you can go ahead and mush it up in a cheese grater. Just run it over a cheese grater if you're worried about getting big hunks of tomato in your sauce. I'm not overly worried, but I've got a rather cavalier cooking style. Oh, this one is not letting go. Come on, you. Oh, and my meat is looking good over there. Yar. Yeah, that one hadn't quite defrosted. It was towards the bottom of the bowl. So I guess you really do have to let these suckers defrost for it to be easy to peel. Because these ones that didn't get quite as much defrost because they were at the bottom of the bowl are proving a lot trickier. So, good to know. How I ended up with frozen tomatoes, because I didn't set out to have frozen tomatoes, you know, is I got some tomatoes in like a cheap produce deal type basket. And I didn't get a chance to cook with them. And so, you know, they started looking a little bit off. And I was like, I know, I want to try that tomato freezer trick. So if you don't have any frozen tomatoes, like seriously, don't worry about it. I just chanced to have frozen tomatoes that have been taking up space in my freezer for a while. So, into the pot they go. All right. My meat's coming along really nicely now. It's almost completely brown. Ooh, it's getting a little hot there. And you can see how it's, well, I hope you can see how it's in nice smaller pieces. We're just going to keep doing it until we get rid of pretty much any hint of pink, although it doesn't matter all that much. Because like I said, it's going to cook in the crock pot for 3 hours, and then it's going to bake for 90 minutes. So you don't have to be all that meticulous with it. This one's barely thawed at all. Okay. It's freaking cold, man. Any frozen tomatoes would be cold. What the hell? Cold, cold, cold. Ooh, that is cold. All right. Okay, in we pop. I'm just gonna stir this up a bit. Oh, God. And since we're gonna be simmering it for a while, you do actually want it to be on the thin side because a lot of that moisture is going to evaporate. So thin is good at this point. Hey, tomato splatter. All right, it's over here. You can stay there for the moment. You are rubbish, 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 rubbish. Ah, yay, rubbish. Now, usually I get my rubbish bin out when I do this, but I'm out of bags because I took them all to the recycling and forgot to save a few. So, my bad. Okay. I'm just gonna move this over here. It's plugged in, it's warming nicely. And so now we're just gonna add our meat from the wok into our crock pot. And I'm gonna want a pot holder for this because that sucker got hot. Where'd my pot holder go? Ah, there it is. Okay. So, here we go. All right. Actually, I'm gonna have to hold it, so mitt it is. So, just bring it on over here. Tilt it and scrape it all on into your tomato sauce. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Nummy, 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 nummy. Nummy, 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 nummy. Make sure you get all those onions and garlic and all that seasoning up in there. And I think, and I could be totally wrong because it's all going to meld together in the crock pot anyway, that the garlic and onions that you actually cooked with the meat is going to give the meat a slightly garlickier, onionier flavor, as opposed to the half of the garlic and the half of the onions that went in there are going to have a slightly meatier flavor, as opposed to all of the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to throw my lid back on, if I can figure out where I put it. Where's my lid? Not cool, Colin. Not cool at all. You need a lid. Okay, well, I'm going to spend a little bit looking for my lid. You don't have to stay tuned for that. So, this is going to, once I find the lid, this is just going to stay on high for about 3 hours. Once your entire house starts smelling of pasta sauce, that's usually a sign that it's done. Like I said, roughly 3 hours, but sometimes I've only left it on for 1 if I was in a hurry, or, you know, I've forgotten about it and left it on there for 5. It really doesn't matter all that much. So, you know, throw your ingredients in your pot and have fun. And I will be back in about 3 hours to go through the next part, although you might see me in just a minute when you click on the next video. Okay, happy cooking!